Welcome to the Hub. We're glad you came by. My name is Garth Lobban, and we thought we'd do something a little different this month as we wind down the year. My guests and I are going to look at the future of AV in 2025 and beyond, which is a really tricky subject. If you're catching this live, we'd like to have you join us and engage with the stream. If you're logged into YouTube, you can post a comment or question for our panelists, and we'll grab it and post it on the screen. Our social media team will also be monitoring our LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter accounts, so share your comments wherever you're watching from. And don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button so you can see more content like this from Atlona. So let's meet my colleagues this morning who will take on this look into the future. From the University of Oklahoma, Chris Burgin joins us. Hello, Chris.
Good morning.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do there at OU.
So I work for the University of Oklahoma. I actually work at the health sciences side, and we deal with all the education of undergrad all the way through their medical career, and even with the hospitals on site. We have several level 1 trauma hospitals, and that offers a whole change of different scenarios that we have to look at. One of the biggest ongoing things is all of our things have to be always ready and always easy to work, and downtime has to be absolute minimum, because there are people using literally life and death things to diagnose and look at situations. Our rooms are all very similar, and they do have some very specialized customizations due to some of the trainings we have to do. But for the most part, the AV side of it is a seamless system, and that is one of the biggest things we tout. We have to have it be easy. These are professionals and people that are training to be professionals, and they really don't need to have to struggle.
Cool. And joining us from Denmark, Christian Glan of COE, excuse me. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you. Fine, thank you. So I work with COE, an international engineering and consulting group. We work within engineering, environmental science, and architecture. And COE took on the discipline as AV consultants back in 2019, and we've been working with it closely ever since. We work across both public and private sectors, much within the corporate space, and also within the educational sector, where we both deal with elementary schools all the way up to universities. Much of our business is within the public space as well, where we've done consulting on everything from city halls to large event spaces and so on. So thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you here. Let's bring on Paul Krizan, my colleague here at Atlona. Hey, Paul, this is your first visit to the Hub. Tell us
Hey,
what
Garth.
you do.
Yeah. Good. Great. So yeah, my name's Paul Krizan. I'm the product manager here at Atlona for our networked AV and our camera products, which means that I'm responsible not just for our portfolio that we have today, but I'm also really keenly interested in working on our roadmap and our portfolio for products well into the future. And I've been working as a product manager for networked AV for 12 or 13 years now. And so I've gotten to really see that technology evolve, and excited to kind of see where we can take it into the future.
Absolutely. We have another guest that will be joining us a little bit later on in the program, a fellow by the name of Joey D'Angelo from DNA Associates. We hope that he'll be able to join us as his schedule allows. So right now, let's just kind of start off with hold on. There he is. He snuck in. I didn't see you pop in on the live stream. Here we go. Joey, tell us about yourself, what you're doing over there at DNA.
I've been here. Joey D'Angelo, president of Joseph D'Angelo and Associates. We refer to ourselves as DNA. been an AV consultant for 25 years, starting in 2023, and worked on many different types of projects. And we're very blessed to have a variety of wonderful consultants located all over the world now, and we're also very blessed to work with a variety of very big, companies doing some amazing projects. Kind of our niche is that we take software and Revit as far down the rabbit hole as you can go, and some of the minds associated with the DNA have invented and created a lot of really great things over the years. So we're happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Well, I'm glad you can join us. I think you and I go all the way back to when you were consulting in the Bay Area, and I was calling on you, and I was working for another company at the time. So yeah, it's great to have you with us. As I mentioned, we're winding down the year here, and it's very easy to look at predictions for 2023. But I'd like to go a little bit farther out. I'd like to be thinking about those systems that are a bit beyond what we're doing today. Chris, let me start with you. When you put on your designer's hat there at the university, what does the classroom AV systems look like after you replace the ones you just put in?
That's always a fun question because this stuff evolves so fast that when you're putting something in, there's already something better out there. Whether that thing works at the level we need it to, where it is all the time, every single time, regardless of what goes on, has yet to be told. So we cannot deploy it yet until it goes through those rigors. And that involves a lot of work in the back end. Currently, what we would be putting in a room are multiple inputs. We usually put in a room PC in our situation, and then we always put in a multi-input for a laptop that also shares out USB to it. The USB part is to handle whatever conferencing they're using or recording that they're using. We see the whole gamut, so we always call it the flavor of the day because it changes that fast. Whether they're using Zoom, Teams, some proprietary, it doesn't matter, but we have to be ready to handle that. On top of that, it has to be simple. So we operate on 3 button presses. You should always, and my apologies about that, we should always have only 3 button presses to get to where you need to. And if you don't, then something is wrong. Something failed in the design. On top of that, we do look at the audio, how to handle those audio situations of involving the group and involving everyone else. Really, after that, it's try and get stuff that's simple, that does multi-features, but at the same time is reliable. That is the biggest thing. If it's not reliable, we will not put it out there.
Got it. And then Christian, as you look at your systems, moving into the corporate space, what are you anticipating is coming next? What's that next room look like?
Oh, both in the corporate, but also in the educational sector and higher educational sector, we see that the flexible spaces is one thing that is really sought for. So spaces that will do more than one thing, spaces that can be configured to whatever need is currently on. Multiple cameras, this notion of digital inclusion, that we're not all in the same room anymore, will always be someone participating from home or from somewhere else than the actual space that you have. So what we see is a lot of requests for design that kind of embraces that. We see the whiteboard, digital whiteboard, coming back into the room. For a long time, it was in a lot of rooms without people really knowing why it's there. It's interactive and it might do something, but it never kind of got implemented. Now, as it becomes a part of Zoom or Teams and integrates into that tool that people already know, there's more requests now to have that and have this notion that you can use that in the meeting and still see people. So using multiple cameras to facilitate that, we see that a lot. And as I said, same goes for educational spaces. As we mentioned before we started here, that we see that as a lot of AV flows into the rooms, the requests for more sophisticated functionality also requests more staff to kind of support it, but it's not the case in most places. So designing solutions that are more complicated, but still easier to use and can be reconfigured by the users themselves, that's something that we see a lot. Yeah.
So Paul, switching gears over to, product development, product management, you oversee our AV over IP designs and systems here, and you really kind of have your finger on the pulse of emerging technologies. When you look into the future, 2025 and beyond, what's coming? What do you see in terms of technologies that will drive that next round of AV systems?
Yeah. So Garth, I think, it's been interesting to see the technology evolve over the last decade, let's say, to where, we're at the point now where you can do 4K signal distribution over a 1 gig network, and it looks amazing. It's really great. And look, a decade ago, people questioned it, but I think we're at the point where it's not just that the technology has matured to where it's quite good. But even that the market and our customers have all sort of said, yes, this is perfect for our needs. So then as we look to the future and we think about video distribution products over IP networks, a logical thing that a lot of people are jumping to is, well, when is that transition to 8K? And what's great is a lot of the codecs we're using support an evolution to things like 8K. But what's interesting is I think even before that, I think we're going to see some interesting intermediate steps where we need that increased video bandwidth, but not necessarily for 8K. I think we're going to start to see a lot of trends towards widescreen displays, particularly as the UC systems start to support more and more layouts with widescreen. So widescreen, but on 4K glass equals a lot of times 5K and 6K resolutions. And I think that's going to drive some demand for that increased bandwidth. What's great is those networked AV technologies are really well poised to support that. So as we look into the future and we see that increased need for bandwidth, I think it may be that there's an intermediate step between 4K and 8K, but I think that's one of the places it's going. The second thing that I think, and maybe in some ways more important than just the video distribution technology, is the ease of use, the ease of installation, the ease of configuration, how to make it easy when you've got all of these discrete distributed endpoints. Exactly to Christian's point, how do you make it easy for a user who walks into a space or an installer who just put a bunch of endpoints in to get that system up and running? And so some of the innovation, I think, is actually going to come around the software and the tools for managing and installing and configuring that.
Yeah.
And Joey, let me get you in here for a second as well. We've heard a little bit about these environments, education and corporate, and we've heard a little bit about 8K and what comes next there. What's missing from your toolbox as you look at your designs that you're putting together? What don't you have today that you'd like to see in the near future and going beyond? Or is there anything you want to get rid of?
Yeah. It's funny. When we, talked about these beforehand, which is good, because we want to give all the listeners a good experience here. But I'm so excited about this part because the things that we specifically need really bad right now are more selection in the PoE loudspeaker and amplifier range of products. Right now, we really need someone to come out with a good PoE pendant speaker that is not a single dedicated PoE drop per speaker, but one per maybe 2 or 4, something like that. We also would really like to see all of the professional AV devices that we specify be available with wireless access. And when I mean Wi-Fi, I mean like wireless access to where we can control and configure these devices and monitor them without having to burn a switch port and a network connection. So I'd like to see us move a little bit away from hardwired. We always want to still have it, but I think we should have a wireless option. We really want to see occupancy sensors on all displays and projectors so we can at least turn displays on or off and maybe, do some basic smart things for rooms that are running Teams and Zoom so we don't have to have a control system. I'd like to see the display manufacturers start getting serious about building some cameras into their products. And I'd like to see them figure out a way to put a camera right there without taking away from the experience so much, because if I'm going to look at my camera, I'm going to look up here right now or down there, but never right in people's eyes. And then something that's very, very near and dear to my heart, and I prepared a little presentation here on this that I would really, really, really love to see, is I would like to see conferencing cameras have a feature that's similar to the way the Ring doorbell avoids motion. So if you have a Ring doorbell at home, you can go into it and drag and drop little areas to avoid motion detection.
Mm-hmm.
And what I want conference cameras to be able to do is I want to be able to do the same thing, but I want to use that to avoid lighting. Because every single conference room that we have these days, I just typed in conference room lighting into a Google image search, and you can see we have all this lighting that's just hanging down or in your face.
Mm-hmm.
And video conference cameras, when they see these bright spots in their field of view, they change their internal irising and adjust their f-stop so that all the subjects of video conferences become shadows.
Yeah.
So we would really love to see some technology applied to, the quality of the images that we're sending into all the Software Codec of the Month Club products.
Yeah, you've touched on a few of my favorite wish list items as well. If I could get a camera in the middle of my display, that would be fantastic. Give me that camera, lose a couple of pixels there, I don't care. Make a pixel right next to it, go blue, green, red, whatever I need, exactly right there. I mean, I'm doing that today, but I've got a split screen, with a Canon in the background and a teleprompter and all that good stuff. That's what we need for business, because we talk about, parity for those who are in the room and those who are outside the room. And we talk about it being fair, equitable for everybody. We want to see everybody face to face like we're all doing right now. We want to be able to look at each other straight in the eye. We talk about the gears so far. We talked about what that room looks like. We talked about what the AV systems may need to do and what you'd like to have on your wish list. I think one of the things we also need to talk about is, how are people presenting in 2025? And when I set that up, I'll go back in time a bit. None of us knew, obviously, the pandemic was coming. Nobody knew that all of us would now become more comfortable with systems from our homes. Those of us who are in home offices said, yeah, we've been doing this for a while. Welcome to the party. Thanks for turning on your camera. But when we go to 2025, how are we presenting? What are we presenting? Because our gear, our systems, they follow the needs of the customers and how they want to present or what they're presenting.
Yeah.
If you look at a Teams room today, they want you to bring everything up from the servers or SharePoint or what have you. Christian, I hear you there in the background. How are we presenting in the future? And that's the equipment that needs to support it.
Exactly. I think the key word is that we won't really be presenting as much as we will be collaborating. And that will be a challenge for our trade to kind of follow that, because I think more and more we will not have people fixed in one place in the room addressing one point, doing a presentation. It will be a more messy collaboration with communication going on across the board, walking up to whiteboardings, having number of angles that we need to cover. So I think a lot of our headaches will be, how do we cover that? How do we follow the people that collaborate so that you have this digital inclusion, that even though you're not in the room, you're still participating and you're getting the full view, and you kind of feel that you can participate to the full extent, really. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the key things that we're seeing.
We were just talking about multiple wireless elements in the room, and wireless accent. Our one of our viewers, John, brings up a really good point for wireless endpoint management. What kinds of security is going to be needed to prevent a hack into the system? Joey, let me send that one over to you.
You're talking about security and hacking?
If everything's going to be wireless, if we're going to have wireless connectivity to all of our devices for setup and all of that, how do we take that? What are the extra measures that we're going to have to take into consideration?
Well, see, I have a very interesting stance on this whole security and hacking and IP thing and whatnot. And I'm of the firm belief that nobody in the AV industry is really an internet and security and hacking expert. And those sorts of things should be left to the people who are in charge of securing and controlling the wireless or the wired or, the networking technologies at the companies we work for. I don't think anybody in the AV industry really has the liability insurance or the wherewithal to kind of, try to design away from those. But, nobody's asking me, how do I prevent this AV system from being hacked? It's kind of always the other way around with a lot of our corporate clients is, hey, here's the AV system we want. And then, we get the feedback from their IT department and they're like, and so then there we go. But, we're not experts in that field at all.
Well, you bring up an excellent point.
That's something we have to deal with every day because of us being on a campus that has medical. We have to deal with PHI and HIPAA. And that is the name of the game. Everything goes through security review. Everything has security to the end. And one of the things that is general in IT that's being adapted is zero trust. That means VPNs, that means login, dual auth, and multiple auths because there's been a way to get past that. It also applies to our storage and anything that passes through, because if it's viewable, it's hackable. We have to protect that no matter what. And that is one of the things that we have to go through validation on any new product that comes in. It has to be checked as stringently as we can before we deploy it.
These are subjects that we touched on in our previous episode here on the Hub. We had Frank and Paul talking exactly about zero trust and talking about network security and AV security. And to the point we came to in that episode, and I encourage everybody to look at it back at our YouTube feed, is that zero trust and really AV systems, and this is really to Joey's point, AV companies, AV integrators, AV designers need to work hand in hand with the IT and security experts at the facility that they're going into. It needs to be part of the design phase just as much as AV needs to be in the design phase earlier and earlier and earlier.
And JB's comment is dead on. Lock down everything. We lock down everything that does not absolutely have to be on. And if it does have to be on, we put it behind so many firewalls, it's ridiculous. But that is absolutely critical.
Yeah, another fact that kind of underlines that is that a lot of corporations, even larger corporations, they don't operate and own their own networks, and they don't kind of have their securities in-house. So you need to communicate these things very early on in order to, because they're locked up on a 99.9% uptime time, and they're locked on security measuring points. So they need to be informed at a very early stage on this is what the corporation wants. And that might even inflict changes to the contract on running the corporate network to accompany some of the things that we're trying to implement.
A lot of good comments coming in.
One of the weird things we ran into was dealing with audio. If you can listen into it on the network, if it's a network-based audio and you can access that, that's a security risk. So that's a weird situation that limits how that is deployed. Is that on a private network? A lot of times that is something we use where we keep it private just to that room so it cannot escape.
It's interesting. I feel like we've spurned a little bit of a security discussion because I was talking about wireless access to devices, but parking that on the side of the road for a little bit and moving the truck down the highway a little further. The reason I'm passionate about that is because I have a firm belief that if you cannot fix a problem with an AV system remotely, then you have a design problem. And to do that, you need to be able to access all those devices and figure out where the problem is and either reboot it or reroute things around it. And you need to be able to do all that remotely. How you do that is you get every device on the network and you do your thing. But the problem is, we don't want to burn 8 network connections for a medium conference room or 12 network connections for a 20-seat conference room or 6 for a huddle room. So, we need to find a way to bring all these devices together and get to them remotely in a more cost-effective way. Because a lot of these companies, they're paying per the switch port for network maintenance and services, and it's insane what they get charged. I've heard, from some of these Fortune 500 companies, they spin up a 50-person office in Brazil and it costs them $5 million for a network there. So switch ports and all that. The security thing is very relevant and very valid. And, we have to deal with that. But my dream is to be able to fix everything remotely. And if you can't, then, you've got a design problem. That's my saying.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't have to hook into it all the time. It shouldn't need that constant connection that you need from a dedicated port.
There's
Mhm.
there's platforms that can let you know if there are problems and whatnot. But yeah.
Yeah, more than ever, it sounds like the most important piece of AV equipment in the future is still going to be the network switch, or has become
Oh
the
yeah,
network switch.
it
The
has
network switch has
definitely.
become the DA.
Yeah,
It is. It is.
yeah. We
The
we,
AV
we, we used to say
distribution
this: the switch
amplifier.
is the switcher. There we go. So, you- sticking into the room for just a second, and we're talking about all the things that support the room. We follow the presenters in the room. We follow what their needs are. How are they sharing in the future? What are they doing when they walk into a room? Joey, you mentioned sensors on displays. We have a display in the room of some kind. If the sensor's built in there or it's a separate sensor like what we have here at Atlona, you walk in, the room has detected you. Okay, you're there. Are we at a point where the room knows who you are when you walk in and begins to set up the room the way you like? How realistic is that? And is this where AI, machine learning, and the system understanding who's now walked into the room, I'm going to set up that room for the way they'd like to present and the information that they want to present? How does that look like?
That's a great concept. I'm just longing to be able to turn a display on and off if there's motion in the room, because we do hundreds of these Zoom and Google Meet rooms, and these companies just leave the displays on 24/7, and that's not very green. We need to be green, and so that's what I was hoping for. But that's not a bad idea, Garth. Like, hey, there's a camera. I see your face. I see that there's 4 people in the room. And that's just how daring do software engineers want to be, the people, and whether it's something that's coming from the display manufacturer or not. But just for now, I'd love to be able to do basic things in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Turn on and off the lights, turn on the display,
Yeah.
little things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Garth, what's really exciting is, sorry, go ahead, Christian. Sorry.
No, that's all right. No, I think you see that in the corporate space. I see that a lot. That the AV equipment really becomes part of the intelligent building. So sensors is part of that. How do you drive the use of AV equipment with a minimal user interface? So I believe that the integration into access systems. So we use this access card here. That's what we kind of identify ourselves with when we go into the meeting space, and the meeting space will adapt to what I need. Sensors that can trigger the functionality. You can read in the Exchange database if there's a video meeting going on here, and the room can act accordingly. All these small handles, using those intelligently, we will need to use APIs a lot more to build this fluent, feeling of walking into a room and start presenting. And also that will be a lot of the handles with the APIs will be a lot of the handles to use to accommodate these flexible spaces. So I see that happening a lot. And in that, we were talking wireless.
Mm-hmm.
One of the trends that we're seeing, I think we'll be seeing a lot more of that going forward to 2025, is that the wireless sharing devices will actually become more and more the intelligence of the room. Because in that you can receive a stream from a digital signage system. You can receive data from sensors, even pick up from its own sensors. You can connect to Exchange to get data from Exchange as to how to act. You have the content, so are we presenting wirelessly? So that unit will actually have all the information you need to build the logic of the room. How should it act when I walk in? And it will kind of utilize that data. We see a number of manufacturers kind of going down that road, and I think looking to 2025, we'll be seeing a lot more of that.
Mm-hmm. And Paul, you were trying to get in there just a second ago.
Yeah. Hey, no problem. So yeah, and what I was just gonna add into that is that really what's exciting for us is we look at cameras today, and there's so much capability built right into the camera. I mean, framing cameras, tracking cameras are very common now and getting better all the time. It's getting to where we can start doing not just people detection and counting with cameras, but also even getting close to the point where we can do things like recognizing who came into a room and setting it up for them, which, and frankly, cameras, there's a big focus on it because they're a sensor, but it's really, I think, as we look at trends into the future, this whole concept of sensors, whether it's occupancy sensors, something to read the badge that you're carrying, like you showed, Christian, recognition of who's in the room with the camera, a hybrid approach. Maybe it's our phones even. And maybe you get this idea of using your phone as your identifier, but also that's where your content might be coming from. And if we can say, Paul's in the room, and also we've automatically set up a connection between his phone and the display in the room and make that part easy for our users, I can see that as being a very exciting trend into the future.
Tom brought up a good point.
And even that.
Tom brought up a good point on there on one of the notes that came up about Siri start my meeting. That scares me to death, honestly, because PHI, HIPAA, that's the environment I'm in. And even at home, if you have a hub or a device that responds to that and you've got people there, any kid will just immediately start chanting out things. How does the system work with that? It's something I've had people request, and I tell them that honestly, in our situation, it is too much of a risk. It's too dangerous to send that vocal processing outside to a cloud and have them analyze it and send it back. The possibility of that getting hacked, the possibility of that having PHI is just way too dangerous for us.
It has to work better than that cologne from that one movie, the 50% of the time, it needs to, your AV system has to work 100% of the time, 100% of the time. And if you say, Siri, start my meeting, she'll say, I don't feel like eating. That's a variable you cannot control. And, it's awesome, but, I'm just glad no one said ALEXA just now, because all of a sudden something would happen in my office.
Yeah. Well, and Joey, I think too, you brought up a really good point. As these technologies evolve for sensors, and then there is the question about voice versus touch or aux sensors or things like that. I think it's important for our users that we deliver a deterministic outcome. I mean, at the end of the day, if you experiment with different technologies, but a user can't get a predictable operation in a room, that also can be a bit of a miss.
Yeah, we do every, a couple times a decade, we get like some crazy resumercial project, right? These really big houses, and the voice control is great at home, because you kind of learn how to speak to your device, and you get them placed eventually where it all works. But it's like someone was saying earlier, all that info goes out and comes back. It doesn't happen locally, so there is privacy concerns and all that stuff. But I have heard of a couple companies. There's one, I think it's called Josh.ai or something like that. That seems to be, a more bougie AV, voice recognition platform that might be a little bit more secure. But, it would be great if we could get, video and audio recognition going. And I'm sure that will happen at some point in the future. You walk into a room. Oh, Garth, how are you doing? I see that you have a meeting scheduled in here. Would you like for me to do that? Yes.
I think that's definitely going to happen, and that's something that we need to focus a lot on going forward, because it is one of the keys to doing easy use of the systems.
Yeah.
So one of the disciplines that we need. Yeah, and one of the disciplines that we as an industry needs to learn is the GDPR design. So where does the data reside? How do we make sure that it is only available when needed and disappears after that? So that will actually be part of the experience design, the AV design to kind of use that. I know in some of the projects that we've done for higher education, they really like the features that a couple of camera manufacturers did now with face recognition. So when the professor walks in, the system knows that's the guy, that's the main guy. I need to follow him, and it works pretty stable. But it raises the question of where does that face data then reside? Is that something that's only he presents a card or something that makes that data available there and it disappears afterwards? So I think we need to take a lot of more of that into account when designing our systems, because we need the data to make the systems intelligent.
And you brought up a good point about the track. Tom brought up one on there with tracking, and you brought up a good point about, is it with you on the card that you carry? That's an important thing, because just last night on the news there was a story about a AirTag tracking stalking people, and that's an issue. That is a huge issue. And I agree fully with you. If we carry it on our person and it's only available to the system at that point in time, that solves a lot of the issues. That's actually how we deal with some things right now, dealing with wireless presentation.
Yeah, but again, this, this audio and video interactive, voice, facial recognition, all of this, I feel like, again, that is an industry in and of itself that will propagate throughout devices, as it matures. And then the AV industry will embrace it when it's ready, right? And it'll probably be consumer led and not, because, you get home, hey, I noticed that you had a long day at work. You had a lot of, that's all coming, but there's a lot of ethical, moral, technical, security, that we're just not going to be able to address in this call.
Well, I think it comes down to there are certain technologies that work well in a residential, in a private environment, that sort of thing as you describe, and it might not work in a corporate environment where we have lots of different people coming in and lots of entities coming in. Obviously, if you've got an RFID badge or it's dialed into your phone and you're into the corporate system, that's great. But what happens when a guest comes into that space? Or what happened when we start using more spaces that are used amongst different organizations, right? Maybe it's a space that isn't one corporation's space. It's a space we're leasing for meetings for this period of time. How much of that information do you want being left behind? We all answer that same question, or have to ask that question of our rental cars. Do we really want to connect our phone to our rental cars? How much of our data is being grabbed by that car? Same thing for these meeting rooms.
And oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Christian had a very interesting design that he was working on not too long ago that was in some ways a little futuristic. Do you want to talk a little bit about the system that you were sharing with us earlier?
Yeah, it's a design made for the Royal Danish Library, which has a department that resides within the Copenhagen University. They have a number of spaces. They've for a long time been talking about hybrid flexible learning rooms, which means that it should be rooms that can be used for a lot of different purposes, and it should be able to accommodate that a lot of students will be participating from the outside. The notion here is that it's completely flexible, so there are no fixed equipment. So depending on what you want when you walk in, you can say, I want 2 or 3 90-inch screens and roll them in. I want a lectern with a control system on and roll it in, and you connect it via the network. So you click it in the ceiling, and it kind of identifies itself. The control system, the user surface, kind of builds itself as you connect equipment. So if you have, in this instance here, you can see you have 2 screens. So a lecturer can have his presentation behind him and the remote students in front of him. And he just configures that. Once he has rolled in the units he needs, he can see on his touch display what he has. And he can say, on that screen, I want the far end. On this screen, I want near end and content. And kind of do that. We're using voice lift, so the rooms auto-configures to the speech, so they don't need to wear microphones. So that's an example of, we've worked for that design. There's a conference setup. So you roll in 3 units, you connect them, you connect 1 or 2 lecterns, and then you have your source points and your showing points, really. Codecs for video conferencing are central, so you can drag them in as you need them and run video conferencing, Zoom, Teams, whatever, from these platforms here.
So in these environments, you've got these rolling, for lack of a better term, the sort of kiosk with the dual monitors on it, but then you have it set up so that multiple units can roll in. These are wireless in some way. You're plugging them to power, but they're auto-configuring based on how they're set up in the room with relationship to each other?
Not in relation to each other, really. You decide that. But as you roll in a unit and click it up into the room, it will appear on your touch screen. And then you assign it a role. I want to use you for the near end. And then you place it where you want. When you connect to the next unit, it will pop on your touch screen. That's screen number 2. And you place that where you want.
Are you doing that with like a big HDBaseT matrix, or is it an IP thing? And then
complete IP. So it's a switch, network switch, running everything. So
this port's connected, and then you pull that data and you populate a touch screen of some sort. So it's just a big matrix.
Well, to bring up,
And the same goes for the cameras. So as you connect each of these 98-inch screens, you get a camera to go with it, and then there's 4 fixed cameras in the room that you can assign if you want to use them in the setup or not. But very intuitive, and the functionality that's not available because you didn't connect the units is just not on the touch display. It only appears as you click in units. And then they want to be able to divide the room, and instead of these big, heavy sliding doors, together with our architectural group, we worked on sound curtains. So it's 7-layer curtains actually to divide the room, and that provides enough damp to not overhearing between rooms.
So Christian, would the next step be to pre-configure it, whether using like when you reserve the room, or would that be to auto-configure? What's your thoughts on next steps on raising the bar in that room?
So pre-configuring could be the first one. Yeah, right now they've decided that the most used scenarios is what you will find in the room. So you don't need to kind of drag everything in from scratch every time. And if you use it in a different way, you put it back. But pre-configuration, and some of it is done now and needed to be done because the voice lift system has to reorientate. So if one of the sound curtain closes, it knows we now have 2 rooms. So if I put a lectern in one room, it will only pop up on that touch panel, not the other one. And also the orientation of when you have voice lift systems, or also when you have video conferencing, you need to configure them so when I teach, I get picked up. But the microphone is not open to all the participants. So you need to, in the panel, be able to control when do I take questions and want an open debate, and when I want to close the voice lift system to only handle me. And I need a sense of direction to do that. And right now, that is pre-programmed scenarios. We would like that to be more flexible as well. We haven't figured out how to do that in an intuitive way. Yeah.
Looks like another use of Joey's sensors. If you've got sensors in the floor and
Exactly.
it knows what unit has been rolled into place and which way it's facing, there's a good idea that it would understand what its role is going to be in that room.
We did something almost identical to that with an 8-way divisible room. But the crazy thing about this room was that the partitions moved this way instead of opening and closing. So it was like super annoying. And all the displays and everything were in the movable partitions. So we had the partitions stop on 8-foot centers the entire length of this big, long facility. And you'd plug in your power and you'd plug in your data. And then the control system would catch that network port getting plugged in and configure accordingly and shift and divide all the audio and do all that good stuff. We called it the collaboration machine. It was a project for General Electric years ago. I wonder if it's still around, but the sky is the limit. I mean, we can design these spaces. It's just creative uses of gazintas and gazoutas, and then, a lot of thought put to the user experience. It's
Well,
So I
there's
think
one thing that
one of the
doesn't
most
seem-
saying, sorry.
Go ahead, Christian.
Just one of the most saying things doing this project, we worked on it on a year and a half. And when we took a picture of the rack, the AV rack, all there's in it is an audio DSP and 2 codecs. That's it.
Yeah.
The rest is IP switches. So that kind of tells us what direction things are moving, right? And I think looking into 2025, that's what we need to focus on. We have all these protocols of DANDE, of DVI, NDI, whatever that we can run. But
Yeah, so it
Getting
sounds
all
like to
together.
me a lot of the physical gazintas and gazoutas are going away, going the way of the VGA connector and disappearing.
Yeah.
Right now, we're sort of in this world of USB-C managing audio, visual, video, data, and power now. We talked about PoE a little bit earlier, but yeah, it's kind of interesting. But the one thing that I don't think is going to go away anytime soon is that we're all still analog beings, right? We need transducers. We need pneumatic air pushers somewhere in the room so we can hear things and things that pick up our voices. And we're going to need some sort of optical device so that our eyes can pick it up. So at least that part isn't changing unless we're going full William Gibson and just plugging in to the back of our heads, which I hope doesn't happen anytime soon.
That also brings up something that we have to deal with a lot here in higher ed, which is ADA and FERPA. Both of those are 2 things that the ADA, we always have to make sure that our stuff's available. In medical, it gets even more fun because closed caption has to be done by a person. I can't even pronounce some of the terms we use. And then going into the FERPA, that's been a big issue right now. Any recording we do, it can only be available to those people in the class. Otherwise, that's a FERPA violation. So how do we address that? How do we leverage some of that accessibility and some of that restriction to help us move things forward? Could it be that, okay, everything is done into a web, like Zoom in our case, and then turned around, you can consume it on your phone if you'd like to see that. You can consume it elsewhere. You can consume it in any way you want, but the option presents itself and satisfies ADA at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Joey, earlier on when we were getting together and talking about this episode, you thought it might be fun for us to kind of take a look at the room that we might be looking at 2025 and beyond. Do you want to run us through what an exercise might be to design the room of 2025 and beyond?
Well, I thought we were going to kind of all design and pontificate together
Sure.
when we look at the 3D model of a room. So I've got a room that we could kind of fly around in and do all that good stuff. So if you want,
yeah, let's bring that up and what does this room look like in 2025 or beyond, right?
Sure. That's the screen we want. This was that room I was talking about earlier, by the way, with the partitions that move. And you can see the little iPads and the connections and how devices were in it. But let's see here. So here we have a divisible room with two room halves, an operable partition in the center here, a soffit, ceiling mics, ceiling speakers, dual displays up front, a separate control room back over here, schedulers on the door. We don't have any floor boxes up front for presenters because of the construction type in this room, but we've got wall plates with power data and AV at the front and rear cameras on each room half. A pretty standard divisible conference room. You can see the front elevation here. So I thought what we would do is we just kind of maybe fly through it and we can all talk about, some of the new technologies or the old technologies or what we need and what we don't need and just kind of go from there.
Well, first of all, we've got to have a room that recognizes that somebody's coming in, but now you've got a divisible space, so we're going to have to recognize when it's opened or closed. So these are technologies that we're working with today. So do we start with the intelligence that goes into the room, what it's all going to be based around, or do we start with how the users are going to use that room?
I will. You guys.
I think we start with, let's look at it from the top down. Let's look at it from the people that are using the room, the audience, then the user, and then the design phase of it. That way we kind of walk all the way through with focusing on the consumption of whatever we're doing in that room by the audience. Because if we don't engage our audience, we lose them.
The simplest way to adapt to a user is to ask a user, what are you going to use the room for? And that data we can get from Exchange or whatever platform is being used to actually book the room. So when, as a lecturer, I book the room, I can say I want frontal teaching, type this and that. And that's what you get when you arrive. So if you have buttons for recording, all kinds of stuff on the touch panel, that disappears. It because focuses on, this is frontal teaching, there's no video. And that's what you get, and the room is set up for it. So in that case, you can pretty easily access data once you put a structure. And how do you ask people to give data? What are you using the room for?
One of the things we haven't talked about is actual video layout, aspect ratio. Today we're in a 16:9, almost 21:9 room. At what point does that wall in the front where Joey's got two displays, at what point does that become a single wall that can be configured any way we want? We've seen the really neat designs coming out of Microsoft's think tank where they've got the 21:9 going across the top, all the faces on the remote side going across the bottom. So when do we get rid of these two fixed, I can't change them screens to one wall that can be any aspect ratio that I want? it's all LED. And does it too need to have a surface on it that will allow us to whiteboard like you were talking about earlier, Christian?
I think the move away from a 16:9 format being the screen has already started to a large extent, and as you mentioned, Microsoft introducing the 21:9 format in Teams room systems, and even double screens is kind of kicking that off even further. I think the pricing on LED, the modularity of building it, and the ease of building it is kind of fueling that change pretty fast. So having a digital canvas that will encompass whatever you want to do, I think that's something we will be seeing more and more. We were talking about that 4K, 8K type thing before. I think with regards to content, presenting content in a room like this or in a corporate space, I don't think, this is my personal opinion, that 8K will fly as such. Full HD, 4K, it's more than sufficient. But in relation to a screen, a digital canvas, yeah, there we will see higher and higher resolution, and it will make sense because you want to be able to take a part of that and have your full resolution. Yeah. And as that becomes financially viable, I think we'll see that a lot going forward to 2025.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Once you can, the financially viable thing is going to change everything. But when we can start getting fine pitch LED products that are easy to install and don't need holy water sprayed all over the wall so that everything is just perfectly flush. And, you don't need to burn incense while you're installing them and wear white gloves. And, once we have a rugged, durable, affordable, tile-based display system, it doesn't even need like special heating or, a $500,000 video wall processor for it. Once we can just, coat walls with these things, we'll have a lot more freedom as designers, but we're still going to have the where does the camera go problem. And, at about 30 inches above the floor, we're going to have chairs that could back into it or tables or whatnot. So, I mean, we still have to kind of design with, where is the primary viewing area? We can always design with, how big can we make it? How much money can we spend or whatnot? But there is, I think in the next 10 years, we might see products like that, as fun pitch.
Your point of the giving up a couple of pixels to a camera would be ideal in that situation. You've got a wall where the wall is your screen, and a couple of pixels are given up. Nobody notices it, especially on something that's 8K or even 4K. And then you've got a better angle, your audience is more engaged, and your remote audience feels more like they're in the environment.
Yeah, I think every tile is going to have a camera element in it, and then the processing capability is built in to decide which camera's got the best view for what I'm tracking or what I'm being told to track. And at this point, it's not just a pixel now within this display field that's telling us an active camera is in action. We're almost going to need some sort of ring around it or some glow to tell us the camera in this series of panels is active. So we've talked a little bit about the video aspect. Has audio changed much in this environment? We have tremendous capabilities in terms of beamforming microphones today. One of our viewers was talking about multiple beamforming microphones that can come into play in rooms like this. We still have to pick up audio in the room. We still have to have meaningful audio for those on the remote side if there's a remote audience here. Is beamforming still the way to go, or are we running wireless microphones still on people so they have the freedom to walk around where they want? What's
beamforming all the way, because the wireless mics, with them moving over to the 2.4 and everything else, there are just between batteries, between user error, it's just such a problem. You have a beamforming microphone that is properly set up and properly sized for the room. Yes, they're expensive, but the fact that they work every time without you having to think about it is part of the whole thing of we want these rooms to be autonomous. The more we can eliminate a control room, a touch panel, a wireless mic, the more we can make the room user friendly for whoever comes in and whatever way they're using it.
John's got a good question here, and I think Christian touched on it earlier. Interactive whiteboarding, I think, continues to be very important in the future.
I've seen cameras do that. where there's some
Exactly.
companies that have released cameras that kind of pick up on this and in essence put you as a ghost on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, you're
Oh,
talking about the Sony thing, right? The Edge Analytics
Al
device.
actually has one that does it now.
Oh, those are incredible. I sit through demos of that product just to watch it go.
Mm-hmm.
Like
So I think one of the things that will drive it is that before you said you have an interactive screen, and that was more of a hype. And when you asked customers, what do you want to use it for? What platform are you using on the touchscreen? That became kind of more blurry. But again, I think the fact that you have whiteboard functionality in Teams, Zoom, and platforms that people are already using, now it makes sense suddenly to kind of reintroduce. Although it's a smaller featured product now, because of the users less resistant to walk up and do it, because now they kind of know it. It's easier. I just initiate it from a platform that I know. It'll definitely come back. We're seeing that a lot. And as you said, you can have cameras on standard whiteboards doing it. And it's not as sophisticated as a real touchscreen. You can really go two ways and stuff. But still, the users are more prone to do it. So it's the user drive will be much higher, and it's a place to start. And I think we'll see that a lot more. Yeah.
It's interesting you talk about user drive. I think about my youngest daughter still at university, and a lot of her classes she's still taking hybrid remote. She's listening to a professor who's in another room someplace else. And I think all of us here working with Teams or Zoom, we're used to having full view very close to us in terms of the content that's being shared. I'm wondering, back to Joey's room, even though we're still there in person, I wonder how many of us are going to be sitting at one of those tables and expecting everything that's on the screen to be right in front of me, because that can be a lot easier to see. If someone's sitting right in front of me, I might not have full view of that screen. I think being there and still having what we might call a hybrid experience, I think is going to be key. And those individuals who are sitting there watching everything immediately on their laptop or mobile device are still also going to want to have the ability to share. Now we're getting back into this engagement within the room. If this is a teaching facility, for example, anybody in that lecture hall that we see on the screen there may also want to see their content or need to share their content backwards as well.
Yeah.
And that wireless wireless sharing of content and being able to, what we used to do in the thing we called active learning spaces, where anyone could present to any of the class. And that now, with some of the stuff that we're using, is possible. We use Zoom primarily around here, so share.zoom.us allows you to do that a lot. I see it getting a lot easier. I want it to be easier.
Yeah. Well, that's a very, very interesting point. So we do these divisible rooms or these active learning things or whatever we want to call them. We're just specking out this giant matrix where we can route everything everywhere and use a touch panel or whatever. But the software codec of the month club is going to enable that on the software side. I was working on a project in Denver and they wanted to do cable TV distribution into all the conference rooms, and all their rooms were Zoom rooms. And we were like, oh, well, we're going to have to switch sources, put a receiver in there. It's going to be a separate system. That's going to change the game. It's going to be a little more complex. Now we need a control system in the room to be able to switch sources. And I said, well, why don't we just get a Zoom endpoint and connect a couple TV channels up to it and set it to present and set it to be available 24/7 and just let the rooms join the meeting if they want to watch TV. And everyone was like, whoa, is that even legal? I don't know, whatever. But one of these companies like Microsoft or Zoom, they could just build AV matricing into their software platform and just wipe that whole segment of the industry out if they wanted to. Not that I would want to see that happen, but it's possible.
Careful, you're going to put a couple of us out of business here on this call.
There's one that's working on it that we've seen. They're still trying to get it right, but I've seen it in demo where it allows you via a iPad to configure the room with multiple units and put whatever you want wherever you want, and just drag and drop.
Yeah, and that's what we have to do as the AV industry of the future, is we have to stay relevant and essential, because these software companies are very powerful if they want, if they want to be.
And
Maybe I should shut up.
and I think that's really a kind of a good note to finish up, as any conversation of the future could go on for hours and hours and hours. And I can see we're at the top of this hour, but I think it's time for us to hop back into the DeLorean and head on back to 2022. So and let everybody get on with their day. But I really thank you, gentlemen, for your thoughts and thinking forward and making the time for stopping by. I'd also like to thank those of you watching and tuning in on our social media channels for engaging with us today. It's been a lot of fun watching your comments pop up. I really appreciate that. Now, if any of you would like to reach out to any of our panelists and get a hold of them, let's put up some of their information here, starting with Chris Burgin from the University of Oklahoma. Thank you for joining us. You can reach him at his contact information that you see there on the screen, Christopher Burgin at ouhsc.edu. You'll also see his LinkedIn information there. Also joining us from COE, Christian Glon, Senior Specialist, AV and Workspace Technologies. You can reach him at krgl@coe.com. Thank you, Christian, for joining us all the way from Denmark today. My colleague, Paul Krizan from Atlona, Product Manager of Networked AV. You can reach him at paulkrizan@atlona.com. Also joining us, Joey D'Angelo, DNA. Thank you, Joey, for stopping by. You can reach him at DeangeloConsultants.com. And I really should be reading this stuff ahead of time, so it's hard to get all of the names right. And then, of course, you can reach out to me. I'm here at Atlona. You can reach me at garth.lobban@atlona.com. And briefly, really quick, I want to give a quick shout out to another one of our live streams that we're producing here at Atlona, the Empowering Women's Success, coming up on December 14th. Another future-looking episode hosted by my colleague, Christina Cruziro. She's got 3 individuals joining her on a discussion about getting into the AV industry. So a lot of future that we're talking about today. So again, I thank all of you for joining us on the stream today. We look forward to seeing you in the next year as we move forward. Thank you again for joining us. If you like what you see, please click like and subscribe. And if you have any ideas or suggestions for a future episode, or if you'd like to join us on a future episode, we'd love to have you. So thanks again. Big shout out to my production team, Evan Wallace, who keeps the stream flowing for me, Stephen Simon, who's wrangling all those great social media conversations that we've been seeing on the screen today. And I want to thank you for watching us. Keep the lights on and keep innovating. Talk to you soon.